Good morning. I welcome you to Meditation in the Meadow on this Tuesday, this Giving Tuesday now. It's an important day, even in the midst of the rain here up in the meadow, a day that we can offer ourselves in support of one another in our communities through offering financial donations to different charities and connecting with those groups like the one that I'm supporting this day, WAVE, the Wisconsin Anti-Violence Effort. So with that, let us take a moment to silence ourselves that we might be more open to the sacred presence within and around us. A reading from Psalm 41. Who among us hears the cry of the poor? How many open their hearts and heed the call? The plight of the world is a wound to the very heart of love, a scar on our own souls. Blessed are those who lovingly respond. The friend who knows all hearts will remember their kindness. They will know joy, peace, and deep fulfillment, working in harmony with all who serve toward the healing needs of this troubled world. In his book, Brendan, author Frederick Buechner writes, pushing down hard with his fists on the table, he heaved himself up to where he was standing. For the first time, we saw that he wanted one leg. It was gone from the knee joint down. He was hopping sideways to reach for his stick in the corner when he lost his balance. He would have fallen in a heap if Brendan hadn't leapt forward and caught him. I'm as crippled as the dark world, Gildas said. If it comes to that, which one of us isn't, my dear? Brendan responded. Gildas, with but one leg, Brendan, sure he'd misspent his whole life entirely. Me, that had left my wife to follow him and buried our only boy. The truth of what Brendan had said stopped all our mouths. We was crippled, all of us. For a moment or two, there was no sound but the birds. To lend each other a hand when we're falling, Brendan said. Perhaps that's the only work that matters in the end. To lend each other a hand when we're falling, when we're struggling. Perhaps that is the only work that matters in the end. Today, as I mentioned, is Giving Tuesday now. We remember in December that there's a Giving Tuesday, but in the midst of this global pandemic of COVID-19, there is a new movement this day of giving for unity as an emergency response to the unprecedented need caused by this virus. So this Giving Tuesday now is designed to drive an influx of generosity and citizen engagement, business and philanthropy activation, and support for the communities and nonprofits, not only here in Wisconsin and across the United States, but around the world, because we are a part of the human family who live in a global community, and we are encouraged to lend each other a hand when we are struggling, and we are struggling. So today we encourage you to take action on the part of first responders, as well as the others the world often might overlook in this: frontline workers and the nonprofits and community organizations that feed, house, educate, and nurture neighbors impacted by this global pandemic. To lend each other a hand when we're falling, perhaps that is the only work that matters. And who of us isn't struggling and falling? You know, I'm grateful for all those who have been, as Buechner writes, lending a hand during this time of economic hardship, during this pandemic, when so many are struggling and falling behind. People, my family, neighbors, friends, the McFarland community, Cambridge, you, wherever you're at, I know are out helping. Lending a hand to those who are falling. You know, over my years of ministry, I've worked with many nonprofits, serving on boards, participating in activities through them. In Greene County, down around Monroe, I was involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I've also been involved with the YMCA board, local food pantries. As an educator here in McFarland, I know our schools, both here and in Cambridge and in whatever state you're in, are serving food for our students and finding ways to provide food for those who are facing food scarcity, not only before this, but in the midst of this crisis. Currently, I work with the state board of the Wisconsin Anti-Violence Effort, WAVE. We are a group of concerned citizens who work to educate and advocate for ways to end gun violence. In this time of social isolation and loneliness, it's amazing to see that we are seeing an increase in gun sales. And we know that so many children now are at home and their families sheltering in place. And we're seeing, because of that isolation and all the different emotions that come around that, an increase in domestic violence and gun violence in domestic abuse situations is on the rise. Like the man who recently shot and killed his 5 family members from a very young age to the age of 41. We're also seeing, as we know, heavily armed, young, white men and some females storming the Michigan State Capitol and other places of protest, threatening violence to get their way, intimidating people. And then yesterday, realizing that because of the requirement to wear a mask into a Family Dollar store for the health and safety and well-being of others, an employee asked a person coming in, a customer, to wear a mask. And she became belligerent and then returned a little later and shot and killed the person. We live in the midst of this pandemic. We live in a nation that has an epidemic, a health crisis around gun violence. And at WAVE, we work to bring healing and hope to the victims of gun violence. And while educating and advocating for sensible gun safety laws that will save lives, because it is a pro-life issue to end gun violence. And we work then to help heal the emotional wounds left from this epidemic that is sweeping our nation, even in this time of global pandemic. As a minister, this is a faith issue for me. As a follower of Jesus, he was engaged in nonviolent relationships, calling us to love and care for our neighbors, even our enemies, and not threaten them with retaliation and violence. He told those who carried weapons, even on the night of his arrest, to put away their sword, for those who live by the sword or the gun will surely die by it. We are to follow his path of love that brings healing and hope to all people. So ending our national epidemic of gun violence is what Jesus would have us do as followers in our caring for the vulnerable and the least among us through the work of this nonprofit that I'm involved in, and for the many other nonprofits, local food pantries, churches that are helping care for people. There are so many good organizations. So today, as we find ourselves all struggling and needing a hand, I hope you'll find it within your heart to be generous and make a donation to WAVE, and if not to WAVE, to some other charity. Because lending a hand when we're falling, when we're struggling, is the most important work we can engage ourselves in this day. So please, if you can, there's information in this Facebook Live about how to go to WAVE to do that. You'll find it on my Facebook page, but please, let us lend each other a hand that brings healing and hope in the midst of a world that seems fearful, and ready to arm themselves. To what end? One leads to life, healing and hope, and the other only to fear and panic and death. Let us pray. O divine healer, help us face the fears that threaten to overwhelm us. Without your guidance, they will bring about what we fear most. We are on our knees asking forgiveness. So give strength to turn all that separates us from you into love and kindness. You who are unconditional love, you do not judge our weakness. Raise us up that we may be renewed in body, mind, and soul. By this, we know that you have graciously forgiven us, and fear did not triumph over us. Though our heart was broken open so that the light could enter, you upheld us, filled us with integrity, and opened our hearts to the poor. Blessed be you, the beloved, loving presence to all hearts open to love, from everlasting to everlasting. Amen. My friends, on this day of giving, of hashtag Giving Tuesday Now, won't you lend a hand? And in lending a hand to your neighbor, to the community, to the citizens around us and around the world, we are lending a hand to the sacred presence that dwells within each of us, lifting one another up, even as God continues to lift us up in the light and love and healing presence that gives us hope and our lives' true meaning. Blessings to you this day. Amen.